The music school was buzzing with energy that morning, though not in the usual cheerful way. Most students were practicing their pieces, their fingers dancing over piano keys with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The teachers were walking around, listening, correcting, giving advice, and occasionally sighing in frustration. Among the students was a young woman who often went unnoticed. She sat quietly at her piano, her back straight, hands poised. But she never drew attention to herself. She arrived early, left late, and seemed to exist in a world that no one else could quite see. The teachers often thought of her as unremarkable. She didn't speak much, didn't complain, and never asked for special attention. She always followed instructions without question, never argued, and never sought praise. In a classroom full of ambitious students, those qualities were easy to overlook. Teachers sometimes assumed that quiet students lacked talent, even when their instincts told them otherwise. That morning, they were more focused on a handful of students who caused problems, needed extra guidance, or claimed they were struggling with their lessons. The young woman, with her calm presence, faded into the background, like a shadow that no one paid much attention to. The head teacher had been discussing an advanced piano piece with the other instructors. It was a notoriously difficult composition, filled with fast runs, complex chords, and emotional depth that challenged even the most skilled players. The piece had a reputation in the school for being almost impossible for average students. A few students had tried and failed, and a few had succeeded, but struggled to bring out the soul of the music. The teachers were determined to test more students with it, to see who could rise to the challenge. They had assumed that most of the students would struggle, as usual. When the conversation turned to the quiet young woman, one of the teachers shrugged. "She's disciplined. She follows instructions. Maybe she'll give it a try," they said. Another teacher frowned. "I don't know. She's been here for months and hasn't shown much. Why waste the piece on her?" The first teacher smiled faintly. "Sometimes the quiet ones surprise you. Let's see what happens." And with that, the decision was made. The young woman would be asked to play the difficult piece, even though the teachers had no idea what they were about to witness. Later that day, the young woman was called into the practice room. She walked in calmly, carrying herself with the same quiet confidence she always did. The room was filled with her peers, all curious to see what she could do. Some students whispered among themselves, quietly speculating that she would struggle and fail. "She's so quiet," one said. "I don't think she's ready for this. It's too hard for her." Another student laughed softly. "I give her 2 minutes before she gives up. It's like everyone else who tried this piece impossible." The young woman heard nothing. She didn't respond. She simply sat down at the piano bench, placed her hands on the keys, and waited for the teachers to give the signal. The room fell silent as the head teacher stepped forward. "Are you ready?" they asked, trying to sound encouraging but also a little doubtful. The young woman nodded once, barely moving her head. She didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't show any nervousness. She was simply present, focused on the piano in front of her. The teachers exchanged glances, a mixture of curiosity and skepticism on their faces. Then she began. At first, the notes were soft, almost delicate, as if she were testing the waters. But there was a precision to every keystroke that made it clear she knew exactly what she was doing. The first few measures were complicated, yet she played them effortlessly, her fingers moving with a confidence that stunned everyone. The students in the room paused, their whispers dying out as they watched her play. They expected mistakes, fumbled notes, hesitation, but none came. Instead, the music flowed smoothly, with a grace and fluidity that no one had anticipated. As the piece progressed, the young woman's skill became undeniable. Fast runs that had tripped up other students came out clear and exact. Chords that seemed impossible to hold together were played with perfect balance. But it wasn't just technical skill that impressed the audience. It was the emotion she brought to the music. Every note seemed alive, telling a story without words. The teachers leaned forward, their eyes wide, unable to hide their astonishment. One of them muttered under their breath, How is this possible?" The students, who had doubted her, now found themselves drawn into the performance. Some sat up straighter, some held their breath, and some quietly wiped away tears they didn't even realize had come. The young woman didn't look at anyone. She didn't seek their approval. She was completely absorbed in the music, as if nothing else in the room existed. Every keystroke, every pause, every crescendo and decrescendo seemed intentional, as if she were speaking through the piano in a language only she could understand. The teachers had never seen anything like it. They had expected an average performance, maybe a few stumbles, perhaps a hesitant attempt. Instead, they were witnessing mastery, something that belonged to professionals, not students still learning their way. The head teacher's hands trembled slightly as they made notes on their clipboard, unsure whether they were recording reality or a dream. They tried to remind themselves to stay calm, but the music was captivating in a way that made calm impossible. As the young woman continued, a subtle change came over the room. The skepticism and doubt that had been in the air were replaced by awe. The students stopped comparing her to themselves. The teachers stopped thinking about the difficulty of the piece. Everyone simply listened, caught in the magic of the performance. Even the air seemed to shift, filled with a mixture of tension and beauty, as if the room itself recognized something extraordinary happening. At one point, a rapid sequence of notes approached, the kind that usually forced beginners to slow down or stumble. The young woman's fingers flew over the keys, precise and deliberate, never once missing a note. A few students exchanged glances, mouths slightly open, as if to ask, "Is she really doing that?" But no one spoke. They didn't want to break the spell. By the time she reached the middle of the piece, the music had reached its full complexity, chords overlapping, melodies intertwining, rhythms shifting unexpectedly, yet she handled it all as if it were simple. The teachers exchanged another look, this one filled with a mix of admiration and disbelief. One whispered quietly, she's a prodigy." The words hung in the air, almost impossible to believe, yet undeniable in their truth. The young woman continued without hesitation, moving through the piece with a blend of technical brilliance and emotional depth that made it impossible for anyone to look away. Her quiet presence in the back of the classroom had been a mask for a talent that was both rare and extraordinary. And in that moment, every person in the room realized just how mistaken they had been to underestimate her. When the final notes rang out, there was a moment of silence. No one moved, no one spoke. It was as if the world itself paused to recognize the magnitude of what had just happened. The teachers looked at each other, unsure whether to speak first. The students stared at the piano, some with wide eyes, some with tears threatening to fall. The young woman slowly lifted her hands from the keys, her expression calm, almost serene, as if nothing remarkable had occurred. Finally, the head teacher spoke, their voice trembling slightly. "That was extraordinary," they said. "I have never seen anything like it." The young woman nodded politely but didn't comment, didn't boast, didn't claim the praise. She simply acknowledged the words and waited for the next instruction. The other teachers followed suit, offering congratulations, questions, and incredulous remarks. But the young woman remained focused, as if the applause and astonishment were secondary to something only she could understand: the music itself. Later, when the students left the practice room, they could not stop talking about what they had witnessed. Whispers of astonishment and admiration followed the young woman down the hall. "I had no idea she could play like that," one student said. "She's amazing," another added. "I thought this piece was impossible for anyone our age. She made it look easy." Even those who had doubted her most began to realize that they had been wrong, and that underestimating someone based on appearances could be a costly mistake. The teachers, meanwhile, were left to reflect on their assumptions. How could they have overlooked her talent for so long? How could they have thought a quiet, unassuming student lacked skill? They began to understand that talent was not always loud or demanding attention. Sometimes it was quiet, patient, and waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And that morning, the young woman had revealed hers in a way that no one could ignore. As the day ended, the young woman packed her things and left the school quietly, just as she always did. No fanfare, no announcements, no desire for recognition. Yet, behind her calm demeanor, she carried the satisfaction of having expressed herself fully through the music she loved. The world around her had begun to notice, but she had done nothing more than what she had always done: play the piano as only she could. That first day marked the beginning of a new chapter. The teachers now knew that their assumptions could not define a student's potential. The students began to see that true talent sometimes hid in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to shine. And the young woman, unaware of the ripple she had created, continued on her path, ready to face new challenges, confident in the knowledge that her music had finally spoken for itself. Little did anyone know, this was only the beginning. The quiet, unassuming student who had once faded into the background was about to embark on a journey that would not only change her life, but also inspire everyone who witnessed her extraordinary gift. After that morning at the music school, the quiet young woman became a subject of curiosity and whispers among the students and teachers. She returned to her usual routine, arriving early, practicing diligently, and leaving quietly. Yet, something had changed in the atmosphere around her. Students who had once ignored her or dismissed her presence now watched from a distance, their eyes filled with a mix of awe and cautious admiration. Teachers, too, found themselves replaying the performance in their minds, unable to shake the memory of the delicate yet powerful way she had played that difficult piece. The young woman herself seemed unaware of the attention she had stirred. She continued to practice as she always had, focused on the music rather than the reactions of those around her. Her hands moved over the keys with a familiarity that suggested years of secret dedication. Each note precise, each pause measured. She seemed to have an internal rhythm, a connection to the piano that went beyond technique and theory. To her, it was not about impressing anyone. It was about feeling the music, expressing emotions that words could never capture. Word of her talent began to spread slowly, first among her classmates, then through the school. Students who had been skeptical now approached her with tentative questions. "Can you teach me how to play that section?" One asked, almost shyly. Another said, "I've never heard anyone make the piano sound like that. It's beautiful." The young woman nodded politely, sometimes offering guidance or advice, but she never boasted about her skill. She treated every question with patience, never making anyone feel small for not knowing as much as she did. Her humility only added to the fascination surrounding her. Teachers, meanwhile, started to reconsider how they had judged her. The head teacher called a meeting with the instructors to discuss the performance. "We underestimated her," one admitted quietly. "She's more than just discipline, she has talent that most of us have never seen before." Another teacher added, "It's not just talent, it's the way she understands the music. She doesn't just play the notes, she makes them speak." They all agreed that they needed to pay closer attention to her progress and give her opportunities to develop her gift further. Despite the growing recognition, the young woman remained unassuming. She did not seek praise, competitions, or public attention. She practiced in the corners of the school, often alone, her music flowing through the empty rooms. Occasionally, a teacher would catch her playing and stop to listen, amazed at how effortlessly she navigated complex passages. Sometimes, students would quietly peek through the doors, mesmerized by the beauty of the sound. Each performance, no matter how small, revealed the depth of her understanding and her connection to the piano. One afternoon, the head teacher decided to test her abilities further. They approached her quietly while she was practicing and suggested she try an even more difficult piece, one that had challenged several advanced students. "I think you are ready for this," the teacher said gently. "It is not an easy piece, but I believe you can handle it." The young woman looked up, her eyes calm and thoughtful. She did not hesitate or protest. She simply nodded, as if acknowledging the challenge and accepting it without question. When she began to play the new piece, the room filled with a sense of quiet anticipation. Students who had gathered to watch held their breath. They knew her reputation had grown, but they still wondered how she would handle something more demanding. The first notes emerged from the piano, delicate yet firm, each one perfectly placed. As the melody unfolded, it became clear that the young woman was not merely skilled, she was extraordinary. She moved through the complex passages with precision and ease, her fingers flying over the keys as if the piano itself were an extension of her body. The teachers exchanged astonished glances. "She's faster than any of us imagined," one whispered, "and she doesn't make a single mistake." Another shook their head in disbelief. "It's not just speed or accuracy, it's the emotion. Every note carries meaning." The young woman's playing was more than technique. It was storytelling. Each chord, each phrase, conveyed a sense of emotion so deep that even the most experienced listeners found themselves captivated. Students who had doubted her before were now openly watching, their earlier skepticism replaced by admiration and curiosity. Some tried to mimic her movements in their own practice, hoping to learn a fraction of what they had just witnessed. Others simply sat quietly, letting the music wash over them, realizing that talent could come in unexpected forms and from unexpected people. The young woman's performance was breaking barriers, changing the way those around her understood skill, dedication, and artistry. As the piece reached its climax, the young woman's focus never wavered. Her hands moved with a combination of strength and delicacy, capturing every nuance the composer had intended and even adding her own subtle touches. The sound filled the room completely, making the walls seem to disappear. Every student and teacher present felt the intensity of the music, as if it had a life of its own. Some were moved to tears, others to quiet reflection, but all were affected in some way. When she finished, The room erupted in applause. Students who had once doubted her were now cheering, smiling, and even laughing in relief and wonder. The teachers stood in stunned silence for a moment before joining in, unable to contain their admiration any longer. The young woman bowed slightly, acknowledging the applause, but she did not linger in the spotlight. She returned to her practice quietly, as if the performance had been just another step in her journey, not a moment of triumph to be celebrated. Over the next few weeks, the young woman's reputation continued to grow. Teachers began to recommend her for more challenging pieces and projects. They encouraged her to participate in school recitals and competitions. Each time she played, she impressed not only with technical mastery, but with the depth of feeling she brought to every note. Her humility and dedication made her a role model, even for students who were older or more experienced. She showed that true talent was not about showing off, but about understanding and expressing the essence of the music. Despite the growing attention, the young woman remained grounded. She continued to practice diligently, always seeking to improve, always focused on the music rather than recognition. She spent hours at the piano each day, exploring new pieces, experimenting with different styles, and perfecting her technique. She also helped other students quietly, offering advice and encouragement without drawing attention to herself. Her generosity and patience made her beloved among her peers, even as her extraordinary talent set her apart. The head teacher, impressed by her growth, decided to arrange a private meeting with her. They wanted to discuss the possibility of entering a national competition, something that could open doors for a professional career in music. "I think you are ready," the teacher said gently. "You have shown incredible skill and understanding. This competition could be the next step for you." The young woman listened carefully, her calm demeanor unchanged. She considered the proposal thoughtfully before nodding. "I will try," she said softly. There was no pride or arrogance in her voice, only quiet determination. In the weeks leading up to the competition, the young woman's schedule became more demanding. She practiced for hours each day, refining every detail of her performance. Her hands moved with increasing confidence and speed, her interpretations growing richer and more nuanced. She studied recordings of great pianists, analyzing their techniques, and then adapted them to her own style. She also spent time exploring the emotional depth of each piece, ensuring that every performance would connect with the audience on a personal level. Meanwhile, her classmates continued to watch in awe. They noticed how she could take a complicated piece and make it sound effortless. They saw the care she put into every note, the patience she exhibited with herself and others, and the quiet joy she seemed to find in playing. Slowly, they began to understand that talent was not just about natural ability, but also about dedication, discipline, and a deep connection to one's art. The day of the competition arrived, and the young woman walked onto the stage with her usual calm composure. The audience was filled with students, teachers, and music lovers, all eager to see the young prodigy they had heard so much about. Some were curious, some skeptical, and some filled with anticipation. The young woman took her place at the piano, closed her eyes for a brief moment, and then began to play. From the first note, it was clear that this performance would be extraordinary. The young woman's fingers moved with fluidity and precision, each note resonating with clarity and emotion. The audience was captivated, drawn into the music as if it were speaking directly to them. Every crescendo, every pause, every delicate phrase held meaning and beauty, reflecting the countless hours of practice and the depth of her understanding. Teachers who had once underestimated her watched in astonishment. Students who had doubted her now cheered silently, fully aware of the incredible gift they were witnessing. The young woman was no longer just a quiet student in the back of the classroom. She had become a symbol of what true dedication and talent could achieve. As the performance concluded, the room erupted in applause once again. The young woman stood, bowed gracefully, and then stepped back from the piano. There was no need for words. The music had spoken for her. She had proven not only her skill, but also her ability to touch the hearts of those who listened. The quiet young woman who had once gone unnoticed had now captured the attention of everyone around her, and there was no turning back. That evening, as she walked home from the competition, she reflected on her journey. She thought about the teachers who had underestimated her, the classmates who had doubted her, and the countless hours she had spent practicing in silence. She knew that this was only the beginning. There were more challenges ahead, more pieces to master, and more opportunities to share her music. But she also knew that she had the strength, skill, and dedication to face whatever came next. The young woman's life had begun to change in ways she had never imagined. She had discovered that her quiet determination and love for music could open doors to new experiences, recognition, and personal growth. And though she remained humble and focused, she also began to understand that her talent was something extraordinary, something that could inspire and touch the lives of others. The journey ahead was still long, filled with unknown challenges and opportunities, but she was ready. The quiet student who had once blended into the background was now stepping into the spotlight, carrying with her the power of music, the beauty of dedication, and the promise of an extraordinary future. After her performance at the competition, the quiet young woman returned to her music school with a mixture of relief and anticipation. She knew that performing in front of an audience was always a challenge, no matter how much experience she had. But something had changed. The teachers and students now looked at her with a new level of respect. Whispers followed her in the hallways, filled with admiration and curiosity about what she would do next. For the first time, she noticed that the world around her had begun to pay attention, and it felt different, both exciting and slightly overwhelming. The head teacher called her into their office a few days after the competition. The room was quiet, the sunlight falling softly across the piano in the corner. "We need to talk about your next steps," the teacher said, their voice calm but filled with a sense of urgency. "The performance you gave at the competition, it wasn't just good, it was exceptional. We believe you have the potential to go much further, perhaps even professionally." The young woman listened, her expression thoughtful, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't show excitement or fear. She simply nodded, acknowledging the words while keeping her mind focused on what lay ahead. The teacher continued, explaining that there were advanced programs, prestigious workshops, and master classes where her talent could be nurtured further. They mentioned opportunities to perform with professional musicians, to learn from experienced instructors, and even to participate in international competitions. The young woman absorbed every word, weighing the possibilities carefully. She understood the magnitude of the opportunities, but she also knew that every step forward would require dedication, discipline, and courage. When she left the office, she walked through the school hallway slowly, her thoughts drifting between the music she had already mastered and the challenges that awaited her. Students looked at her with admiration, some offering shy smiles or gentle congratulations. Teachers stopped her in passing to discuss pieces, techniques, or future opportunities. Even though the attention was new to her, she handled it with quiet grace. She did not seek the spotlight, but she also did not shy away from it. She understood that talent, once recognized, could not remain hidden. In the following weeks, she began practicing more intensely than ever before. She dedicated long hours to mastering complex pieces, exploring nuances, and refining every detail. Her dedication amazed everyone around her. Teachers observed that she was not only talented, but also endlessly disciplined. She never complained, never sought shortcuts, and never compared herself to others. Her focus was entirely on the music, on understanding it, and on expressing it fully. The students around her watched in silence, slowly realizing that true talent was more than skill, it was commitment, patience, and passion. Despite her progress, she faced moments of doubt. Late at night, alone at the piano, she sometimes wondered if she was truly ready for the challenges ahead. Could she perform under pressure on bigger stages? Could she connect with larger audiences? Could she handle the scrutiny that came with recognition? These thoughts did not paralyze her, but they reminded her that talent alone was not enough. Hard work, persistence, and courage were equally important, and she was willing to face them. One afternoon, a visiting pianist came to the school to conduct a master class. The room was filled with students eager to learn from the guest, but the young woman was particularly attentive. She watched every demonstration closely, absorbing techniques, phrasing, and interpretations. When the guest asked if anyone would like to perform for feedback, she hesitated for a moment before raising her hand. The room fell quiet as the instructors and students turned their attention to her. She played a complex piece, one that many of the other students had found intimidating. From the first note, the visiting pianist's eyes widened. The precision, control, and emotion in her performance were immediately apparent. The way she navigated intricate passages, balanced dynamics, and brought out subtle expressions left everyone in awe. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, followed by spontaneous applause. The guest pianist approached her, shaking their head in admiration. "You have an extraordinary gift," they said softly. "Keep nurturing it. This is only the beginning." After the master class, the young woman walked quietly to the practice room, her thoughts a mixture of pride and calm determination. She knew that recognition was encouraging, but it was not the goal. The goal was music itself, the endless pursuit of understanding, expression, and connection. She practiced late into the evening, exploring new compositions, revisiting old favorites, and experimenting with subtle changes in tempo and phrasing. Her music became deeper, richer, and more expressive with each session. Meanwhile, the school began to notice changes in the students around her. Many were inspired by her dedication and talent. They practiced more seriously, pushed themselves to improve, and approached the piano with renewed focus. Some sought her advice, asking for guidance on tricky passages or how to interpret certain pieces. She helped them patiently, demonstrating technique slowly and encouraging them to find their own musical voice. Her humility and generosity made her beloved, even as her talent set her apart. A few teachers started thinking about the impact of underestimating students. They reflected on how easily talent could be overlooked and how assumptions about personality or demeanor could cloud judgment. The young woman's success had become a lesson for them as well as a source of pride for the school. They began to pay closer attention to other quiet, unassuming students, wondering if hidden talents lay waiting to be discovered. The young woman's life outside the piano was quiet but full of purpose. She walked through the town with a calm presence, observing people, nature, and sounds with a careful ear. Her connection to music extended beyond the piano. She noticed melodies in everyday life, rhythms in footsteps, patterns in conversations. This awareness deepened her interpretations of music, allowing her to convey emotions with a subtlety and authenticity that few could match. As her reputation grew, invitations to perform at local events and school recitals increased. She accepted them cautiously, focusing on each performance as a chance to share music rather than gain recognition. Audiences were often captivated, some moved to tears, others inspired to take up instruments themselves. Even in larger venues, she maintained her calm composure, letting the music speak rather than her presence. She had learned that true artistry required humility, patience, and the ability to connect with listeners in a meaningful way. One particularly challenging day, she was asked to perform a piece she had never attempted in front of a large audience. The piece was known for its difficulty, requiring not only technical mastery, but also emotional depth. She spent hours preparing, breaking down sections, practicing transitions, and imagining how each phrase would resonate with the listeners. When she finally walked onto the stage, the audience sensed both anticipation and nervous energy. Yet, as she began to play, the music flowed naturally. Every note, every chord, every pause carried intention and meaning. The audience was spellbound, experiencing the story she told through sound rather than words. After the performance, she received compliments not only for her skill, but for her ability to move people emotionally. The teachers were proud, the students inspired, and the audience deeply touched. Yet she remained calm, almost indifferent to the praise, focusing instead on what she had learned from the experience. She understood that each performance was a step in a journey that was far from over, a journey that required continuous effort, reflection, and growth. Her growing reputation also brought challenges. Some students, feeling overshadowed, struggled with envy or insecurity. They whispered doubts about her methods or speculated on her intentions. The young woman noticed these reactions but did not engage in conflict. She remained polite, focused, and kind, allowing her music to speak for her. Over time, even the most skeptical peers began to respect her dedication and talent, recognizing that her success was earned through hard work rather than luck or favoritism. As months passed, she encountered more advanced compositions, new styles, and increasingly complex performances. Each challenge was met with quiet determination and careful preparation. Teachers provided guidance, peers offered support, and she continued to explore the depths of her abilities. Every piece she learned became not just a performance, but a study in emotion, technique, and storytelling. Her connection to the piano deepened, and with it, her understanding of herself and her potential. Despite the growing attention, she maintained her private, reflective nature. She still practiced alone in quiet corners, explored melodies in the streets, and sought inspiration in simple, everyday experiences. She understood that the truest connection to music came from authenticity and sincerity. Audiences could feel the difference between skill performed for applause and skill performed for understanding. Her music always came from the latter. By the end of part 3 of her journey, the young woman had transformed not only in skill but in presence. She had become a source of inspiration for peers, a lesson for teachers, and a figure of admiration for audiences. Yet, despite her growing recognition, She remained focused on her ultimate goal, to understand music deeply, express it truthfully, and touch lives through her art. The quiet young woman who had once been underestimated had now begun to step fully into her potential. The path ahead promised even greater challenges and opportunities, but she faced it with the calm, steady determination that had defined her from the beginning. Music was no longer just a practice or a hobby. It had become her language, her voice, and her way of connecting to the world. And though the world had begun to notice her brilliance, she understood that the most important recognition came not from applause or awards, but from the quiet satisfaction of having expressed herself fully, truthfully, and beautifully through the piano. Her journey was far from over, and the lessons she would learn in the next stages would test not only her skill, but her courage, resilience, and heart. The young woman's talent had grown so much that it was impossible for the school and the surrounding community to ignore her. Word spread quickly about her extraordinary abilities, and soon invitations began arriving from local music events, small concerts, and recitals. While she remained humble and focused on her practice, the attention was growing, and it brought new challenges she had never faced before. She knew that performing in front of larger audiences was different from the quiet practice rooms she was used to, but she also recognized it as an opportunity to share the music she loved. The first invitation came from a local cultural center, which was organizing a recital for young talents. The head teacher encouraged her to participate, assuring her it would be a valuable experience. The young woman hesitated at first, thinking about the crowd and the expectations. She had always been more comfortable behind the piano, letting the music speak instead of her presence. Yet, she understood that growth sometimes required stepping into the spotlight. After careful thought, she accepted the invitation on the day of the recital. The hall was filled with people. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, and the air was heavy with anticipation. Families, teachers, students, and music enthusiasts filled the seats. Some had heard of her talent through word of mouth, while others were curious to see a young pianist who had been described as extraordinary. The young woman sat at the piano backstage, quietly preparing herself. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting her mind settle. Her fingers traced the keys gently, feeling the familiar contours and weight of the instrument. When it was her turn, she walked to the piano and took her seat. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned toward her. She did not speak, did not smile, and did not make any gestures to draw attention to herself. She simply placed her hands on the keys and began to play. From the very first note, it was clear to everyone that this was no ordinary performance. Her fingers moved with elegance and precision, navigating the complex composition effortlessly. The melody flowed smoothly, with every note perfectly balanced, resonant, and expressive. The audience was captivated. People leaned forward in their seats, completely absorbed in the music. Some closed their eyes, allowing the sound to wash over them. Others sat in quiet awe, noticing details they had never heard before in a piano performance: the subtle changes in tempo, the delicate phrasing, the way she shaped each chord to convey emotion. The teachers in the front row exchanged looks of disbelief and pride. They had known she was talented, but seeing her perform in front of a larger audience was different. It was an experience that revealed just how deep her gift ran. As the piece reached its climax, the young woman played with a combination of strength and delicacy that left the audience speechless. The music seemed to tell a story, one that transcended words. Every note carried emotion, every pause held meaning. She was no longer simply playing a composition. She was creating a living, breathing performance that connected with everyone listening. Even those who were not familiar with classical music found themselves moved by her artistry. When she finished, there was a moment of stunned silence, followed by a wave of applause that filled the hall. People stood, clapping enthusiastically, some with tears in their eyes. The young woman bowed politely, acknowledging the audience, but she did not linger on the applause. To her, the music was always more important than recognition. She returned backstage, her heart steady, her mind already thinking about the next piece she would practice, the next challenge she would take on. After that recital, her life began to change more noticeably. Invitations to perform at other events came more frequently. Local newspapers wrote short articles praising her skill, and even a few music blogs mentioned her performances online. The recognition was exciting, but it also brought pressure. Suddenly, she was no longer just a student learning quietly in a classroom. She was becoming a young musician with an audience, expectations, and a growing reputation. She had to navigate this new reality carefully. The teachers continued to guide her, helping her balance practice, performances, and personal growth. They encouraged her to take on more challenging pieces, to explore different styles of music, and to consider participating in regional competitions. They also reminded her to remain focused, to practice diligently, and to let her music speak for itself. The young woman absorbed their advice, carefully planning her practice sessions, and taking the time to understand each new piece she approached. As she prepared for a regional competition, she faced her first real challenge. The competition required playing multiple pieces, including one that was known for being especially difficult for young pianists. Many students had attempted it and failed, and some had succeeded only partially. The young woman spent weeks studying the composition, breaking it down into sections, practicing each part slowly before combining them. She experimented with dynamics, phrasing, and tempo, striving to bring out the emotion hidden within the notes. Her dedication was intense, and even her teachers were amazed by the effort she put into perfecting every detail. The day of the competition arrived, and the young woman felt a mixture of calm and determination. She understood the stakes, but she did not allow fear or pressure to control her. She focused on the music, letting her fingers find the notes as naturally as she had in her practice sessions. When she began to play, the audience was immediately captivated. Her performance was precise, yet full of emotion, and each piece flowed seamlessly into the next. The judges watched in astonishment, noting not only her technical skill, but the depth of feeling she conveyed. By the time she finished, it was clear she had made a profound impression. The audience erupted into applause, and the judges' notes were filled with praise. They commented on her precision, her expression, and the way she seemed to communicate directly through the piano. It was not just a performance. It was an experience that left everyone in the room feeling inspired. The young woman remained calm, acknowledging the recognition quietly, and then returned to her preparation for the next challenge. Despite the growing attention, she never let herself become complacent. She continued to practice with the same discipline and focus as before, exploring new compositions and refining her skills. She also spent time helping her peers, sharing tips, and offering encouragement. Her humility and generosity made her beloved among students and teachers alike. Even as her reputation grew, she remained the same quiet, determined individual who had first amazed her teachers months earlier. As her performances became more public, she also learned to handle criticism and expectations. Not everyone was supportive. Some competitors and audiences expressed skepticism or envy. She encountered whispers of doubt, suggestions that her talent was overrated, or that she had been given opportunities unfairly. But she did not let these opinions affect her. She focused on her music, understanding that true artistry required resilience as well as skill. Every challenge, every critique, was an opportunity to grow stronger and more confident. Over time, she began to see the impact of her music on others. Audiences were moved, inspired, and sometimes even transformed by her performances. Teachers noticed students practicing harder, trying new techniques, and seeking to improve after watching her. Parents spoke of their children discovering a new love for music, and through it all, the young woman remained focused on her purpose, to express herself fully, truthfully, and beautifully through the piano. Her journey was no longer just about personal growth. It had become about inspiring others. She understood that talent could be a powerful force, not just for recognition, but for motivating, teaching, and connecting with people. Every note she played carried more than just sound. It carried emotion, experience, and a quiet message about the power of dedication and hard work. As part 4 of her story progressed, the young woman began to think more about her future. She realized that her music could take her far beyond the walls of her school and her local community. Opportunities for advanced study, scholarships, and even international recognition were possible. But she also understood that, with these opportunities came responsibility, the responsibility to remain true to her art, to work tirelessly, and to stay humble even in the face of success. The young woman's daily routine became even more structured. She balanced practice, performances, and personal study with careful precision. She continued to seek guidance from her teachers, remaining open to feedback while trusting her instincts. She explored new genres, experimented with techniques she had never tried, and studied the work of great musicians from the past. Every day was a step forward, a lesson learned, and a chance to grow stronger. By the end of this part of her journey, the young woman had not only gained recognition, but also maturity. She had learned to handle pressure, navigate expectations, and remain true to herself. She had faced challenges, impressed audiences, and inspired her peers. Yet she remained humble, understanding that her greatest teacher was the music itself, and that the path to mastery was never complete. The quiet, unassuming young woman who had once blended into the background had now become a figure of inspiration, both for her school and her community. Her talent, discipline, and dedication had begun to open doors that no one had imagined, and while recognition and applause had become part of her life, she remained focused on what truly mattered: the music, the practice, and the quiet satisfaction of expressing herself fully through her art. Her journey was far from over, and the challenges ahead promised to test not only her skill, but her courage, perseverance, and heart. Yet she faced them with calm determination, ready to embrace whatever opportunities and obstacles lay ahead, knowing that her music was more than just sound. It was a reflection of who she was, what she loved, and the extraordinary potential that had always been inside her. The young woman's life had changed more than she could have imagined. From the quiet student who once sat unnoticed in the back of the classroom, she had become a young pianist whose talent was spoken of with admiration both within her school and in the wider community. Yet, despite the growing attention, she remained the same focused, humble person she had always been. Recognition did not distract her from what mattered most: the music itself. Every day, she continued to practice, to learn, and to explore the depths of expression that only a piano could allow her to reach. Her journey had not been easy. With every opportunity came pressure. She now performed in front of larger audiences, at events where people expected brilliance and perfection. Each time, she felt a quiet tension, a mixture of anticipation and responsibility. She knew that her skill alone was not enough. She had to connect with the audience, to make the music feel alive, and to communicate something beyond the notes themselves. She spent hours preparing, imagining how each performance would feel, and refining every detail of each piece. One day, she received an invitation to perform at a prestigious regional music festival. It was the kind of event that drew professional musicians, critics, and aspiring young talents from all over the region. Accepting the invitation was both exciting and nerve-wracking. This was a step further than she had ever gone. She knew that the audience would be more discerning, the expectations higher, and the stakes greater. But she also understood that this was an opportunity to share her music with a larger audience, to grow, and to learn. When the day of the festival arrived, the young woman felt a calm determination. She had learned to channel her nervous energy into focus, letting it fuel her preparation rather than distract her. Backstage, she took a few quiet moments to breathe, running her fingers gently over the piano keys, feeling the familiar weight and texture of the instrument. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the sound she wanted to create, and then walked confidently to the stage. The hall was filled with people, and the atmosphere was electric. She could feel their anticipation, their curiosity, and their expectations. Some had heard of her talent from previous performances. Others had come with no knowledge of her abilities, ready to judge her solely by what they would hear that day. The young woman took her seat, her posture calm, her hands ready. She did not speak or gesture. She simply let the music begin. From the first note, it was clear that the young woman had grown immensely since her first performance months earlier. Her playing was precise, yet deeply expressive. Each phrase flowed naturally into the next, every chord balanced perfectly, and every note carried emotion. The audience was immediately captivated, drawn into the music as if it were a living, breathing presence. Some closed their eyes, lost in the melody. Others leaned forward, mesmerized by the skill and the emotion that filled the room. As she progressed through the pieces, the audience realized that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The young woman's fingers moved with agility and grace, navigating difficult passages effortlessly. Yet what truly distinguished her performance was not just technical mastery, it was the way she communicated through the piano. Each pause, each crescendo, each subtle change in tempo felt intentional, conveying emotions that words could not express. The music spoke directly to the hearts of everyone listening. The judges of the festival, seasoned musicians themselves, watched in awe. They had seen many talented performers, but there was something unique about her. Her playing combined mastery of technique with an emotional depth that was rare at any age. They whispered among themselves, noting the clarity of her touch, the richness of her tone, and the way she seemed to inhabit the music rather than simply play it. One judge, a pianist with decades of experience, said quietly, "I have never seen such understanding and feeling in someone so young. She is remarkable." Even the students in the audience, many of whom had come to learn or to compete, were inspired. Some began to think differently about their own practice, realizing that talent alone was not enough without discipline, dedication, and a genuine connection to the music. Others watched quietly, absorbing the subtle ways she shaped each phrase, learning more from her performance than they could from any lesson or textbook. She had become more than a performer, she was a teacher without words, a model for what dedication and passion could achieve. The performance continued, each piece revealing new layers of her talent. Fast, intricate passages were executed flawlessly, yet the soft, delicate moments were equally powerful. The music carried a sense of story, of emotion, and of understanding that captivated everyone in the hall. The audience experienced a range of emotions: awe, inspiration, joy, and sometimes even tears. Every note, every pause, every subtle nuance was a testament to the countless hours of practice, the quiet determination, and the love for music that had always driven her. When she finished, there was a long moment of silence. The audience seemed almost afraid to break the spell, unable to believe what they had just heard. Then, slowly, applause began, building into a standing ovation. People cheered, clapped, and even cried, moved by the beauty of her performance. She bowed politely, acknowledging the appreciation, but did not dwell on it. To her, the applause was not the goal. It was the natural response to music that had been shared fully and sincerely backstage. The head teacher and other instructors beamed with pride. They had known of her talent, but seeing it recognized on such a stage was a moment of profound joy. They,